The Andromeda Galaxy is the only galaxy visible to the naked eye outside of our own galaxy. So you can see the Andromeda Galaxy on a clear night. It's near the Milky Way. You have to know where to look, and I kind of forget exactly where to see it. It's a little fuzzball, but you can see it. So it's twice as big as the Milky Way galaxy. I said ours is 100,000 light years across. The Andromeda Galaxy is 200,000 light years across. I think that we should make the Milky Way galaxy great again and make it as big as the Andromeda galaxy. I'm just being ridiculous, but there's this competitive quality to the male of the species. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. Just that, oh, so the astronomer Edwin Hubble discovered with probably the Palomar telescope down in Southern California in 1927 that the little dots in the sky, some of them were other galaxies. And they're now thought to be up to 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. And that just means what we can see with telescopes. There may be no end to the universe. What would end it? And I don't think that fits with the way the human mind works. We cannot grasp the facts of our universe. We can just be astonished. And that's good enough. So I brought up the life on Earth. This is about life on Earth. I wanted to mention, from the last talk, I put together this galactic primer. This is just the top of the galactic primer. It's 3 pages long. If you want it, I'll email it to you. And I just pulled out the information that I thought was most astonishing about what we talked about last week. So you can read there, the number of stars in the Milky Way is unknown. We don't even know how many stars are in our galaxy. I mean, why would we? It's 100,000 light years across. It's incomprehensible, but it's just one of 2 trillion galaxies. I think we need to my actual ultimate feeling is we need to retain a place in our mind to be astonished at all times at the universe that we live in. And that is not unrelated to meditation, to having some quiet place in our mind. We're not constantly thinking, where we are just astonished to be alive. So there's other information here. The nearest star is Alpha Centauri. It's four light years away. That's, the speed of light for 4 years to get to the nearest star. So if you want this, just email me and I'll send it to you. It's the information from last week. I'm going to do the same thing this week because I'm equally astonished with the information that I put together. And I would constantly go to Google and say, I forget the kinds of questions I asked them. I mean, so I remember I just asked him about a half an hour ago, what's the difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell? Some of you know those terms and some of you don't. It comes up in the slideshow. I've known it. I forget it. So I had to Google it. Google knows everything. Google is God. You've probably heard that said. Here are the subjects of these 4 presentations. And I'm just, these first pulled up a couple of naturalists because Meta-Naturalist deals with this subject of the evolution of life on Earth and how it relates to the Methow Valley. So if you don't subscribe, you might want to think about doing so. And there's a lot of information that the Meta-Naturalist has come up with through the years on who do we share the watershed with. This is a list of the birds of the Methow. There are many, many lists. You name it, we have a list of them. What are the mammals of the Methow? How many are there? How many other mammals in the Methow are there? Birds, reptiles, amphibians, plants. The plant list is finished, but I'm redoing it. But there's 1,200 vascular plants in the Methow Valley. Vascular means that doesn't include moss. Anyhow, all that information is available. Just ask. Here's where all the action is. So that arrow points to a dot. It's hard to see it, but that dot is actually a picture of the Earth taken from some spaceship that we sent out into space. And it just gives a sense of the relativity of all things. If you were lost in space, you would not be able to find the Earth. And this is obviously still well within our galaxy. But the thought that all of the human drama, and this is actually from Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, which is a video you can see at YouTube and very well worth watching. But he says all of the drama, all of the trauma, all of the wars, all the animosity, this is where it all takes place on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. That's what he says. It's just breathtaking. You know, look at Andy Miller's popping around there. Themes in evolution. So this is a little more big history and a little, I don't know that Bill Bryson talks about in a short history, but it's interesting to try and in some way capsulize, organize our understanding of what's the journey of the universe. So here are a few themes. Things have gotten increasingly complex, and we're going to talk about these as we go along. New things constantly emerge. I like to say, if you're looking for hope, there it is, because the universe is always new. It doesn't seem like it looks the same every day, but it changes over time. Everything is just right on planet Earth for life to exist. It may not be true anywhere else in the universe, and there are major thresholds. Things change over time. There were no stars. Now there are stars. There were no planets. Now there are planets. We're going to talk about this. That's a hydrogen atom up there in the upper left. It has one proton and one electron. And I think typically, actually, most atoms have neutrons. I think hydrogen often doesn't have a neutron. And I looked that up on Google. Why do hydrogen atoms not have a neutron? Neutrons separate the protons. Protons are positively charged. You can get up to uranium, I think, is 92 protons. They're all positively charged. You'd think they fly apart. Well, in uranium, they do, but that's the first radioactive element because it gets so big that it can't. But the neutrons separate the protons, so they aren't in contact with one another, and they allow these atoms to exist. Anyhow, like I say, it's endlessly complex. I don't remember what the next picture is. Oh yeah, that's a blue whale. It's made up of 100 quadrillion cells. Early life was single-celled. Most life is still single-celled. Multicellularity arose, I forget, 600 million years ago, but not billions of years ago. Life is 4 billion years old. For most of the history of life, it was single-celled. It was an emergent property of the universe for cells to learn to work together, become multicellular. Look at this, 100 quadrillion cells. Also, the blue whale starts out as a single cell. It has to, an egg fertilized by a sperm, like most, probably all life. So it started out as a single cell. Somehow it had all the information in a microscopic single cell to grow into a blue whale. Now, is that a miracle? Is that not a miracle? I think I had a few tidbits. I'm so astonished by this animal. It's the largest animal that has ever lived on the planet. It's larger by far than any dinosaur. And they are alive today, but their numbers, as you might guess, are diminished. I have the numbers. I don't know if I can find them. It's thought that 200 years ago, there were 300,000 blue whales. Now it's thought there are 15,000. So they're endangered. And that's because we kill them and eat them. Not so much anymore. I'm sure they're protected now and not killed. But it brings up the whole subject of Homo sapiens, our species' relationship to the other living organisms on the planet, and the emergent transition from hunter to steward. We need to be stewards of life. That's my phone. I'm not going to answer. So emergence, the universe has emerged. There was nothing. There was, the scientific story is there was a, what is that thing? Never saw that before. Might be related to the phone call. The Big Bang is not comprehensible. Surely nobody understands how everything appeared from nothing in a flash. But if you run the universe is expanding. If you run it backwards, it all goes to a point. And that's where the idea of the Big Bang came from. There was some kind of explosion of potential and the universe appeared, but there was only hydrogen. was the only element that existed with a little bit of helium. The other 90 elements that exist today, naturally occurring elements, did not exist. They have emerged over time. So literally, and our bodies are made out of mostly elements that are not hydrogen or helium. So the potential for life has emerged over time. Where did these elements come from? The hydrogen came from the primordial gas cloud, the gas cloud that existed up at the top there, that existed after the Big Bang. Other elements were forged in stars. Well, there are different kinds of stars. There's red giant stars. This is hung up. Let's see what we got here. There. Red giant stars are big stars. So this is the kind of thing. Our star is a small star. It's called a yellow dwarf. I have the temperature of it. It's not really too relevant. It's probably something closer to 100 million degrees or less. I have it here. I don't have time to look for it. I can't remember all these facts. But stars vary in how big they are and how hot they are. And the hotter they are, it infers the faster the atoms are moving, and they crash into one another and they fuse together. Red giants at 200 million degrees, that's pretty hot. You're going to get a lot of activity. The atoms are crashing into one another. They fuse together, and you just see that those numbers are the number of protons. So in the middle, on the second row, carbon has 6 protons. You add one more proton, you have nitrogen. One more proton, oxygen. It's a very orderly universe. Hot blue stars. Oh, I didn't get the temperature there, but supernovas. Supernova explosion, when I think a red giant collapses, probably a hot blue star as well, temperature goes up to 180 billion degrees, and you get elements beyond iron. Iron is at the end of the second or third row with 26. Anyhow, it's just an emergent universe. Things are constantly emerging, constantly changing. We don't think of it in that way. It's the brilliance of the human mind that has figured out that this is what has occurred, and hopefully we can do good. Everything is just right on the planet for life to exist. I numbered those handily. So the center of the sun is 27 million degrees. The outer sphere of the sun is something more like 15,000 degrees. It cools off rapidly, but the temperature of space, the dark place, is minus 450 degrees. The center of the Earth is 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why it's molten. That's why there's molten rock in the mantle that creates volcanoes. What's the average temperature on the surface of the Earth? 69 degrees. So the sun is 27 million degrees, and the Earth is 59 degrees. So that's Goldilocks effects. I have a long list that I've made up of Goldilocks effects. I didn't figure them out. I find them, but everything is just right for life on Earth. We don't know why. It's a mystery. Big history talks about thresholds that that emergence goes through. So the Big Bang was a threshold. There was nothing, then there was everything. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you can't have stars until there's hydrogen. Stars are fusing hydrogen into helium. It takes a lot of hydrogen. It takes gravity. I looked up gravity several times today, doing my homework, and what is gravity? Nobody really understands it. All objects with mass in the universe attract all other objects in the universe. Why? Nobody knows. I don't think anybody knows. I mean, Einstein said something about bending of space-time. But all the hydrogen atoms had a little bit of gravity. That cloud of gravity a cloud of hydrogen atoms attracted itself and grew together in a ball. The heat and pressure increased so much from the collision of the atoms that it ignited, and it started to fuse hydrogen into helium, 1 proton into 2 protons. So the elements were created. You can't have planets without elements. You can't make a planet out of hydrogen. You need many other things, especially oxygen and silicon, which make quartz. You can't have life without planets. You can't have planets without elements. It's an emergent universe. It's an evolutionary process. Photosynthesis, Lynn Margulis, famous for being Carl Sagan's wife for a while, but very famous biologist in her own right, noted photosynthesis is the single most metabolic activity on the planet. We don't appreciate photosynthesis adequately, but that's where all the food came from. Everything you ate for breakfast, everything you ate for every time, any time in your life is the energy of the sun captured in hydrocarbon bonds by photosynthesis. And the sun's 93 million miles away. How's this possible? So Homo sapiens arose, abstract thought. I think Homo sapiens are something a little different. It's their emergent property of the universe. They have a lot of potential. I wish them well. And here's that incipient intelligence and ecology. Ecology is the understanding and the reality that all things are interrelated. Life is related to itself and to the geosphere. Intelligence is the capacity to, I would say, most of the capacity to interpret the world that we live in, but it's also the ability to override genetic programming. And by that, I mean we are genetically programmed to be somewhat aggressive and to compete. Intelligence is the capacity to override that with something that works, is more functional at this time in the evolution of the universe. That's my own interpretation. So plate tectonics, I think we talked about plate tectonics last time, but plate tectonics was something new. I think the U.S. Geographical Society only accepted the fact that continents moved over the surface of the Earth in about 1930. That's less than 100 years ago. It's just astonishing. It was Alfred Wegener, who came up with the best scientific information that the continents had moved. And I want to find, fortunately, I numbered those. There are a couple of great statements about plate tectonics. The scientists, when Wegener put forward in a paper his hypothesis that the continents moved, the scientist William Scott said it was utter rot, utter damn rot. A geology textbook in 1960 said the drifting of continents is a physical impossibility. This is very recent, very recent. The human species is 200,000 years old, and it's only the last 50 years that we've known about the dynamics of the surface of the planet. This is a little bit about those dynamics. This is a ocean. I just like this simple, almost childish graphic of plate tectonics. Continental crust over on the right side with volcanoes is made out of a different type of rock than ocean crust. It has more high silica rock. Silica is SiO2, silica and oxygen. It's just less dense than some of the denser elements like iron and magnesium, literally less dense. I have some on the porch. If I could have you pick them up, you would see the difference in them. So that when the two are pushed together, the oceanic crust, which is denser, subducts, sinks under the ocean crust. It's jammed in under the ocean crust. It heats up because of heat and pressure, and it remelts the rock and creates these volcanoes. So it's just a little insight into the dynamics of the planet, which is very relevant to the Methow Valley. I forget if I showed this the first week, but there's two pictures here, upper and lower. The upper picture shows the plate tectonic process of the ocean crust being pushed by some force we haven't talked about, being pushed into the continent. The oceanic crust is denser, it subducts, it melts, creates volcanoes, which shows up in the lower picture, but it also crushes the sedimentary rock, which has run off the continent, which you can see in the upper picture on the right. They have the sedimentary rocks in different colors. They're layered under the ocean. And then in the second picture, they're crushed by the process of plate tectonics as this piece of continental crust, which we call a terrain, which is lighter rock than the ocean crust. So it doesn't sink with the ocean crust. It accretes, gets pushed on to the continent, and in the process, it deforms the sedimentary rock. And that is the story in brief of the Methow Valley. And here are Methow rocks. So this is Twist Formation rocks. This is near the Winthrop Post Office, right on the highway. At the top of the hill, after you go towards Twist, this is where this picture is taken. You can see it almost 90 degrees. It's sedimentary rocks. It has marine fossils in it. It's 160 million years old. That's the cleverness of the human mind to figure out how old these rocks are. This is the Virginian Ridge. You may be familiar with that scene. It's in lines like that because it's marine sediments turned up on end by the process of plate tectonics. So it's the story of the Meta Valley, basically. So I think we're back to emergence. Things self-assemble. Why do things self-assemble? I don't think we know the answer to that. But the hydrogen atom assembles. It has one proton, one electron, and no neutrons. If you get enough of them together, you create stars. Stars self-assemble. In the early universe, there were no stars. It took gravity to pull the hydrogen together. But now look, what self-assembles? All these elements. This is periodic table of elements. There's 92 naturally occurring elements. They've all self-assembled. Partly because it's inherent. I think I need to go to a quote here. Silica, more silica, granite made up of various elements combined together. The earth has assembled out of these elements that self-assembled, and then life appeared. I'm going to look here. I have a good quote. Yeah. So there's a Nobel laureate. I think he's now passed away, Christian de Duve, but he says about self-assembly, which is the topic of the moment. He says, there's no shortage of ordered self-assembly in the universe, from snowflakes, good example, to the rings of Saturn. So powerful is this natural impulse to assemble that many scientists now believe that life may be inevitable, more and more inevitable than we think. Life may be an obligatory manifestation of matter because life self-assembles and life complexifies over time, at least on Earth. How did life appear? What's the force behind the appearance of life? We don't know. We don't know why life appeared. This is a cartoon of God creating snakes. And he says, these are so easy to make. He just has to roll them between his hands. And he's got a little pile of them started there. It's just a cartoon. And this is another cartoon. This is trying to create life in the lab. So people have actually tried, of course, to create life in the lab. They've come up with more complex molecules. They have not come up with life, but this is a cartoon where they got all these beakers and test tubes, and it drops into a beaker, and this creature crawls out and says, "Are you my mommy?" But this has never actually happened. It remains a mystery how life arose. So this may be a reiteration of the emergent process from the rocks. Somehow, life is made up of the elements of the earth. I think I may have said that last time. I think the last slide reiterates that. There's a nice statement by a Zen person who says, we are not on the earth, we are of the earth. Life emerged from the elements of the earth. So those are bacteria. It's a microscope picture of bacteria led to, I think this is a humpback whale, no longer a blue whale. So characteristics of life, it self-assembles. That's not entirely different from minerals, from atoms and minerals, which self-assemble. Life is sentient. I wouldn't say that. I don't know it for a fact, but I wouldn't say that quartz is sentient. It responds to its environment. These are characteristics of life. Life acquires energy to maintain an internal environment that's out of equilibrium with the external environment. Your inside of your body is nothing like what's going on the outside. And where does it get the energy? Obviously, it gets it from a star that's 93 million miles away. It's an improbable story, you must admit. Life is made of cells. That was only figured out in the not too distant past, which we talk about. Life reproduces with DNA, which is fairly magical. Life changes over time. How all this happened is unknown. These are characteristics of life, but we have never figured out how life came to be. Life has diversified over time. This is the simpler image. I was working on this like 5 minutes before I had to connect with Donna because I didn't have these in the order I wanted. Let's see how I did. So there are different ways to understand the evolutionary journey of life. One is divided into prokaryotes and I think maybe I was hoping eukaryotes. Eukaryotes just came up on top there. So the word prokaryote means before the seed. It means before the true cell, prokaryotes. The prokaryotes are bacteria and archaea. They're single-celled, they're simple cells, they're different than the kinds of cells our body are made out of. Our body is made out of eukaryotes, which means the true cells. A little bit of ethnocentrism there, that we have true cells and bacteria have, um, at best, primitive cells. At worst, they're not even true cells. But that's just human names. So this is the tree of life. The first creatures may well have been archaea, which are single-celled, simple organisms compared to multicellular organs. But the interesting thing about archaea is they're extremophiles. There are archaea that live in the hot springs in Yellowstone, up to 250 degrees. Living organisms living in water that's 250 degrees hot. Bacteria, and then the tree of life continued to expand into protists. So protists are single-celled organisms that we've heard of, like amoebas. We've all heard of and seen images of amoebas. They are made out of eukaryotic cells, much larger cells than bacterial cells, very different, but still single-celled. And then cell life became multicellular. Plants, for example, fungi, and animals. This is I think there's a few circles here. I forget why I circled them. Oh, because of domains. So the scientific community has rather recently not only divided life into 6 kingdoms, the 6 kingdoms shown, but also 3 domains: bacteria, archaea, and the eukaryotes. I don't know if that gets circled. It does. Eukaryotes. Bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes are so different chemically and evolutionarily. The scientific community felt compelled to divide them into 3 divisions that we've hardly ever even heard of. This is fairly recent, but probably dates back to the 70s. So this is a little bit on the difference between bacterial cells and archaea, which are prokaryotic cells, and our types of cells, which are eukaryotic. By the way, we have more prokaryotic cells in us than eukaryotic cells, but our bodies are made out of eukaryotic cells. Let's see, that there, a prokaryotic cell is 1 to 10 Those are micrometers. A micrometer is a 1,000th of a millimeter. Remember, a millimeter is about the smallest space you can make with your fingers. I'm trying to show you there, millimeter. Divide that by 1,000 times, and you get micrometers. And so 1 micrometer would be the size of a prokaryotic cell. It's just a huge difference. You can see, obviously, there's something going on there. There are membrane-bound structures inside our cells called organelles. The word means little organs that are not in prokaryotic cells. It's just a part of the evolutionary journey that cells complexified. I should have put in here, well, maybe I did. I forget if I did. There's a little more. You can just see that prokaryotic cells are simple and eukaryotic cells are complex. It's just a fact. So this is another tree of life. Let's see, I want to go back. This is a nice simple tree of life that we can understand, and this is a complex tree of life that we cannot understand, but it still has, I should have circled them, but over here on the left are bacteria and archaea. Well, those are prokaryotes. And then eukaryotes emerge with a more complex, larger cell, and all the other organisms: fish, reptiles, amphibians, mammals. I put LUCA in here, I think. Yeah, LUCA. It's nice to know about LUCA. It stands for Last Universal Common Ancestor. As far as science understands, life only appeared once on planet Earth. We don't know how it happened, but all organisms are literally related to all other organisms on the planet. It gives me the chills, to tell you the truth. So we didn't know that cells existed. All life is cellular. It has a external cellular membrane that separates it from the rest of life and from the environment. It maintains an internal environment different from the external environment. How does it do that? We don't know. It does it with the energy of the sun, but how it organizes itself, we don't know. But it was, this has all been discovered by human beings. So Robert Hooke discovered the cells. He was looking at cork. He was looking at cork and he realized that it was cellular. And he named it after the cells that monks stay in. Monks stay in cells, life stays, all life is cellular. It was only 1939, less than 100 years ago, that Theodore Schwann discovered all life is cellular. This is a sperm fertilizing an egg, and I don't really know quite the point I want to make, except that it's still it's two cells that merge and become one cell. But I remember that I have written down here that the human egg is 85,000 times larger than the human sperm. It's just a shocking fact. So again, all this we've had to learn, and to make our way to any information that's real, we always have to work our way through mythology. The human mind is just a great myth maker. So it was, yeah, Anton Leeuwenhoek. Anton Leeuwenhoek discovered living cells in 1674. 1674. So down here I have this date, 1694, 20 years later. Leeuwenhoek created the first best microscopes, and he could see singular cell life in water, like paramecium and amoebas and many other types of organisms. Um, so the human imagination went to work, and in 20 years later, Nicholas Hartsucker got his hands on a microscope and looked at human sperm, and he could see that there were tiny preformed men inside the sperm, like there. And people believed that for a while. There's a little guy inside the sperm. The point is, everything we know we've had to figure out, and these are more little humans. And people believe this for a while, that we started out as little people and we grow into big people. It's been a difficult journey to figure out. And this is the actual complexity of a eukaryotic cell. They will say that the complexity of a single cell, which is microscopic, is similar to the complexity of a 747 Ford jetliner. Looking at my watch. Now we're doing pretty well. I think there's like 30 slides and this is 22. So we're making progress. So I think we're going to talk, I just circled mitochondria up at the top there. They have that distinctive look. They optimize their internal surface area by being divided. Single cell organism, protist, but a eukaryotic cell, not a prokaryotic cell. It's not bacteria. It's complex. We mentioned this. Anton von Leeuwenhoek first saw these in 1674. I actually forget what I want to say about this. I could look it up. Hang in there. 33. See if there's anything important here. Oh, well, it's 23. Well, mostly, I already did mention it, that these are like a micron or two. They're just invisibly small and were unknown until the microscope was discovered. And now there is some information here. There are more microorganisms inside our body than there are human cells. So the human cell, which starts out as a single cell, a fertilized egg, somehow knows how to diversify into 40 trillion cells, somewhat like that blue whale, which had 100 quadrillion or something like that. But over time, it diversifies into the various types of cells that are required to make a living organism, especially a mammal or a human. And these are some of those cells. So I was fascinated. I've always been fascinated by the evolution of the heart. So the heart is pumping blood. Let's see what we got here. The heart is pumping blood, but it is clearly the heart has evolved over time. I think it's worth contemplating, for one thing, why does it need to circulate blood? What's in the blood? One of the primary qualities of blood is that it transports oxygen throughout the body. What does the oxygen do? Do we know? Mostly we probably, I mean, I've known for years and I had to remind myself what it does. Oxygen is a very reactive element. It reacts with the hydrocarbons made by photosynthesis, which have captured the energy of the sun in the hydrocarbon bonds. Oxygen breaks apart the hydrocarbons in our digestive system and releases the energy of the sun into our bodies so that our cells can function and we can be living organisms. Well, the process of transporting that oxygen in the blood has evolved over time. So these are pictures of how the heart has changed over time with a fish heart with one ventricle and one auricle. If you remember those names, atrium and ventricle, atrium. So the upper part is the atrium and the lower part is the ventricle, and the blood comes in from the body and has to get pumped to the lungs and pick up oxygen, but it gets mixed together. The blood in a fish, the blood that has been enriched with oxygen in the lungs and the blood that's coming back from the body gets mixed together. It's very inefficient. While fish seem highly active, they just don't have the kind of energy that mammals have. So the heart has evolved over time, and you can see the evolutionary process. This is looks like two atria, two atricles, and one ventricle. But again, the blood's getting mixed. Amphibians don't move all that much. They're not all that active because they have an inefficient circulatory system. Arguably, it worked. It's worked for a long, long time, but they don't have the kind of energy, the capacity to move actively that later evolved organisms have. Reptiles, I think it's just incomplete. The separation between the atria and the ventricles is not complete. And as the heart evolved, it just perfected the process of separating blood that was oxygenated from blood that was not oxygenated. And so mammals can afford to be warm-blooded. They can afford to go out on a 10-degree day and be active. Go out and try and find an amphibian right now. You're not going to find one. Try and find a reptile. It's not going to happen. It's because of this evolutionary process of increased efficiency of transporting oxygen to the body to break apart the product of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is capturing the energy of the sun in hydrocarbon bonds. It combines carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water to create sugar. I think I have sugar down here. Sugar is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's a hydrocarbon bond. If you break that bond apart, energy is released. So by interacting with oxygen, it's oxygen, though there's oxygen in energy-rich chemical bonds, also known as sugar. It's oxygen, which remember is a very reactive element, breaks the bonds apart. It forms water and carbon dioxide, and free oxygen is released. Well, it's released in the process of photosynthesis. But the interesting thing is, so I brought this up, and I think I have the name of it here. This is a clip from this is a screenshot from a movie that's on YouTube. It's worth watching. It's called Photosynthesis at MIT. It is now 20 years old, but it's interviews with graduates of MIT, and they have no idea how photosynthesis works. And that is the point of that very entertaining video, Photosynthesis at MIT. He's been handed this piece of wood, and they ask him where this wood came from, and he says dirt. It's that graduation at MIT, and he thinks that the biosphere is made out of dirt. It's not. It's actually made out of carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. So this is a bit of the evolutionary journey. The first photosynthesizers was the all-time, other than life itself, photosynthesis was the all-time great metabolic invention of life, of how to capture the energy of the sun in chemical bonds. The first organisms to do that were cyanobacteria. Cyano means blue, blue-green bacteria. So it's interesting to me that we have cyanobacteria. Things don't disappear. It's just that life builds on itself. But we have cyanobacteria in the Methow Valley. This is a picture of water at the edge of the Methow at my home, down at the edge of the river. These are pine needles for scale. This is a rock sticking out of the water. This is cyanobacteria. It's not really desirable to have cyanobacteria. It's an indication of too many nutrients in the water. Well, the Winthrop Sewer Lagoon is upstream of my house. That's why there's so many nutrients. But these are some of the first organisms on the planet called stromatolites from 4 billion years ago. There are places in Australia where they still exist, these stromatolites. They are made from cyanobacteria. So the first organisms that lived on the planet still exist. It's just that life has continued to diversify over time. These are mitochondria. Mitochondria is where the hydrocarbons are broken down and the energy is released, and our cells are full of mitochondria, just full of mitochondria. But the interesting thing about mitochondria, remember, it was, I guess, cyanobacteria are organisms, the previous slide, are organisms that know how to capture the energy of the sun, to photosynthesize and captures the energy of the sun. Some cyanobacteria are single-celled. The theory is that mitochondria and our cells are full of mitochondria. It's how the energy is taken out of the hydrocarbon bonds and passed on to the body. They seem to be an endosymbiotic organism. It's previously were bacterial cells that were captured by larger cells and began to function within those cells. So they became an organelle. They became an organ within a cell that continued to function. And that is thought to be the evolutionary process of how larger cells captured these photosynthetic bacterial cells. Where do you get your mitochondria? Mitochondria have their own DNA. The cell has DNA. We know that. Our cells have a nucleus. The DNA is inside the nucleus. Mitochondria DNA is not in the nucleus. It has its own DNA, and all DNA in the mitochondria is only passed by females. So that's where that term mitochondrial Eve comes from. If you've ever heard that term, mitochondrial Eve, all the DNA in our cells comes from our mother. And hers came from her mother. There's no mixing of DNA. We're near the end of time here. But it fascinates me, what is the human body made of? The human body is 65% oxygen. It's 18% carbon. It's 10% hydrogen, 3% nitrogen. It's made out of elements formed in stars, literally. These elements were formed in stars except for hydrogen, which was present at the beginning of the Big Bang. So we are made out of stardust, and we are a product of the evolutionary journey of the universe. I like to say this is a picture of the sun orbiting around the Earth. But the sun doesn't orbit around the Earth. We thought it did for a lot of human history. It looks like it comes up in the east and goes down in the west, but it doesn't. That's the Earth orbiting. But it's just a picture. Where do we get our life energy? This is a picture of the Earth. I mean, a picture of the sun at different times in its movement. But the point is, where do we get our life energy? It all comes from the fusion of hydrogen into helium in the sun, 93 million miles away, photosynthesis. So it all seems overwhelming to me. It does seem miraculous to me. We are not on the Earth. We are of the Earth. Our bodies are made from the Earth and from the emergent properties of the Earth. And I think it's just awesome. Well, that was a mouthful. Hopefully some of you are still here.
Thank you, Dana. We are still here. And it's just so much to think about. I think what's fascinating is just a little bit of history of the journey of our understanding, right? And how we've looked at things over time, and relatively speaking, how new our understanding is of so many
Exactly.
facets of this.
Exactly. That's what made a big impression on me. Both the fact that this scientific evolutionary story is almost certainly real. The evolutionary story of life on Earth, which is ancient, is real. But also, I mean, I use that term incipient intelligence, but it's nothing if not intelligent that Homo sapiens has figured out this evolutionary story of life on Earth. It's just phenomenal. It's strange
Yeah,
that we can be so intelligent and so unintelligent at the same time.
yeah. And your comment that our intelligence really is our ability to override our genetics. Is that what you
Yeah,
shared?
I'll often use the term biological imperatives. Intelligence is the ability to override biological imperatives, but those biological imperatives are genetically programmed. The most notable which is competition.
Hmm.
I mean, I have a grandson who's 10 years old, and he I had a big fight with him when he was here this summer because he wouldn't give me my butterfly net back. I grabbed it out of his hands, and then we were both pissed off because we're males and we're biologically and I've been trying to get over that ever since. But I was controlled at that moment by biological imperatives. And we both apologized to one another. The notable thing is he's 10 years old and he apologized to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Well,
that's
obviously, yeah,
emergent.
something we're still struggling with as a species, like, yeah, how to be smart and kind at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and kind is a great word because such a powerful phenomenon. It seems to be canceled out by the competitive aspect of our biological inheritance, but kindness is a force in its own right. And I think I meant to say it at that early slide. Maybe not. I don't know where I wanted to say it, but if the universe started out as just hydrogen, where does kindness come from?
Hmm.
Where does love come from?
Hmm.
I mean, they are emergent properties. I doubt if it exists in a hydrogen atom. They're emergent properties of the universe, but they are properties. Kindness and love do exist, and I think are struggling to find their place.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how our understanding of that evolves, and hopefully we do have more answers. Um, we did have a comment from Andy. Thanks for another informative lunch chat on this lovely chilly day. I do think this is a great way. I think you used the term way back, Dana, when we were first talking winter together. Like, this is a great activity to winter together on cold, chilly days. To join each other on Zoom gives us an opportunity to learn and see each other's faces for a few minutes and take in this great information. But I would open it up for questions if anybody has a question or a comment. Um,
Donna,
and
were you able to post the previous slideshow or this one?
thank you for asking that question because I have not, but I will. I actually have that on my list today to learn how to do that, to post it to YouTube. And so I will do that and make sure I can send everyone an email when it's up, and provide the link so that you could join. So both last week's session and this week's session will be available on the Meadow at Home YouTube channel.
And the reason I asked is because this material is rather complicated. There's a lot of numbers that they may not be important to remember the numbers, but you could review the slideshow. In fact, I could send you the notes if you happen to be that interested, which are numbered to go with the slides. But the main
Mhm.
point, I think, is really remembering that life is a miraculous opportunity, especially for us who are healthy and have enough food, unlike,
Mhm.
some large proportion of the human population. It's just remembering to appreciate what we've got.
Yeah, so true. Very important to be thankful. Andy comments from silver and gold kindness. That may be a famous quote. But yeah, so many amazing aspects to our life here on Earth. And everything we see, right? It's just you can be in wonder all day long, every day.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody knows how to maintain that quality, put it in the chat. But I try and remind myself. I try and
Yeah.
remind myself. And it's really partially how we operate our mind. That's my personal perception is it's a matter of maintaining space in my mind to remember something about it could be a thought. This is a
Mhm.
miracle. I'm amazed that I'm astonished. It's just something that adds a glow to the moment, a psychological glow.
Yeah. So true. So true. And so lucky to live here where kind of that wonder and awe and amazement is easy, to take in, like maybe take in is not the right word, but to live in awe in our beautiful surroundings.
We are very fortunate, yeah,
Yeah.
as most of us know.
Yeah. Well, just share again that Dana is very open for questions, if anyone thinks of anything throughout the week, and also is willing to send out his notes, um, that he has prepared. If anyone's interested, you can email him.
Right.
Um, we do have a comment here. I'd like to go back to that table of what we are made of in percentages. So I look forward to review this on YouTube. So someone's looking forward to reviewing that on YouTube, the percentages of what we're made of. Yeah. Dana's showing it again.
Yeah, interesting. We're mostly oxygen. That seems positive. I'm a fan of oxygen.
Yeah.
By which I mean, in part, that I remind myself to breathe deep, take good,
Mhm.
take good deep breaths.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a very good practice. To be intentional about our breathing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, if we don't have any more questions today, I'll work on getting this on YouTube. We'll look forward to seeing you. And can you give us a hint? You shared it at the beginning of the presentation, but a hint of
Uh,
what's to come next week.
Somehow we're going to talk about the evolution of primates, our evolutionary line, which is a
Mhm.
great subject. I think here, I'm going to put in my pointer. These are seals up here. Seals are not primates. But if I had time, I could take that down and turn it around, and there's primates on the other side. It's just all these stories of the evolution of life are so interesting, but I think we're slightly more interested when it's our own evolutionary line. And
Yeah.
most primates show a lot of the qualities that Homo sapiens show. So
Mhm.
that's what the next talk is about, primates of the
Okay.
world.
Yeah. And keeping in mind that we're all related, right? Like every living organism.
We're all
That's
related to Luca.
Yeah, that's pretty overwhelming to think about.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Dana, and thank you
thanks.
to all who have joined today. And hopefully, this gives you a lot to think about this week. And we'll look forward to next time to being together next Tuesday.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks for your help.
Okay. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.